Swayam Prabha. Digital India. Educated India.
Hello everyone, let us continue our discussion in the topic population problem as a metaphor that is introduced by Haydn. And in this lecture, we will be discussing the tragedy of freedom in commons, and especially the author Professor Haydn, he has taken into account two contexts. One is the tragedy in the commons in form of population growth, and the second one is the tragedy in the commons in form of pollution itself. So, that is why Haydn described this population problem as a commons itself. Why again? Again we need to analyze the characteristics of the commons. So, from the very first lecture we came to know that this commons satisfies two attributes or characteristics. The first one is it is non-excludable, and the second one is however it is rival. So, if everyone in this context of population or population explosion, everyone is allowed to breed, that means you can breed or he can breed or she can breed. So, that means it is leading to non-excludability. No one is excluded from the freedom to breed. And the second one is that as a result of this, the per capita availability of world's goods, it will be decreasing in a finite world. That means the share is actually rivalry. If you are consuming, obviously the second person in a row cannot consume. So, it is highly rivalrous. And if you are producing one child and he is getting the benefits from this world in terms of enjoying some goods and services, then obviously the second person who wants to bring a child into the world, the same amount of benefits he cannot actually enjoy. That is what it is said that this kind of scenario, that is population problem, is also satisfying the second characteristic of the commons, that is the rivalrous characteristics. So, because of these true attributes, you can say that the population problem can be treated as a common. Then what is the tragedy? Tragedy of the freedom in a commons. So, in his subtitle he discussed about the scenario of the tragedy of the commons, and he had taken the narrations by the English mathematician and economist William Foster Lloyd, which he talked about, which he actually picturized in 1833. So, what is the picture about? What is his imagination about this commons? So, this is about the picture of a pasture which is open to all the herdsmen, and it is to be expected that each of the herdsmen, they will be trying to keep as many cattle as possible on the commons, because it is free and it is accessible to all. But however, if every herdman they are practicing the same practice, they are doing the same practice by adding one more animal to their herd, and then everyone is accessing this pasture, then what is happening, or what will happen in this if this practice is continued? So, after a point of time, the very practice generates the tragedy. What is the tragedy? In destruction, degradation of that particular pasture. However, if you are thinking about the choice about the human being, or here it is the case of herdsman, then any rational being or any rational herdsman, what they will be doing? They will be trying to maximize their gain. What is their gain? That means how to utilize or how to increase the utility by adding one more herd and sending their herd to the pasture itself. So, now the question he asks himself, what is the utility to me of adding one more animal to my herd? This is what every rational herdsman they will be asking themselves. So, what will be the answer, or what is the logical answer they will be thinking about? Out of this utility, if you see this, then it has two aspects. One is the negative aspects and the second one is positive aspects out of this decision, that let us add one more, to my herd. So, in the if you see the positive components, then you will be finding that when the herdsman he will be trying to add one more animal into the herd, into his herd, then obviously whatever the gains he will be getting out of selling this herd, selling a particular animal, that animal only, then he is the only owner. He can get all the benefits out of it. He can sell the animal and he can, whatever the benefit or whatever the cost he will be doing, then he can actually get it. So, that is why the sale of the additional animal, if you see, he will be getting fully, and the positive utility, if you say, it is almost nearly plus 1, it is positive. So, it is nearly 1. But if you take into account the negative components of this decision, what is the decision? That is adding one more into the herd. So, here what is the negative aspect here? That the quality of this pasture or the quality and quantity of the grass in the pasture itself, it will degrade. So, as a result, if the particular herdsman will be suffering, that he will be thinking that my animals or my herds, they are getting less quantity and quality of the grass in the pasture. So, obviously, the same feeling or the same will be also felt by the other herdsmen. So, if this is the cost to the first herdsman, this is also the cost to the second and third and nth herdsman. So, as a result, the negative utility for a particular decision making herdsman is only a fraction of 1 only. It is not nearly 1, it is just a fraction of minus 1. So, in this context, if our assumption is that the human beings are rational, or here in this case we are saying that all the herdsmen are rational, then obviously they want to try, they will be trying to maximize their utility out of it. So, how to say that how they are maximizing their utility? By evaluating the benefits and costs out of these actions. So, in this situation, the herdsmen, they will be concluding that the only sensible course for him to pursue is to add another animal to his herd and another and this will be going on. So, what is the conclusion is reached by this scenario that William Laird has actually talked about, that every rational herdsman will be, when they will be sharing a commons, it will be leading to a tragedy. Then what exactly the tragedy is here? So, here the situation is that each of the herdsmen, they are locked into a system that compels them to increase the herd without any limit. But remember that this world is limited, that means the pasture is limited, but they are thinking to add unlimited number of animals to their herd. So, as a result, what will be the final situation? So, it will be a ruin. Ruin is the destination towards which all herdsmen rush. This is a kind of mad rush for possessing more animals, then extracting more pasture, extracting more grass from the pasture itself, and each pursuing his own best interest in a society that believes in the freedom of the commons itself, because everyone is having this freedom to access the commons, and as a result it is ended in the ruin. So, in this process we can say Hardin remarked that freedom in a commons brings ruin to all. If your decision to access the pasture is that you can access more, you do have this freedom, no one can actually change your decisions to access the pasture, then obviously it will be going to ruin. Some more examples in practical life that we are also following, we are also feeling the same situations. So, the examples can be the fishery in the oceans or the national parks all over the world, which is open to everybody. So, these are the situations also in where we are finding the similar kind of actions or decisions by others, which are leading to degradations of fishery in the oceans or the biodiversity in the national park itself. The second aspect he talked about, apart from this pollution as an example of commons and how it is being dealt, the second example he talked about is pollution. And there he argued that pollution is also said to be the commons and which satisfies these characteristics, but here the situation is something different. So, what is the situation different, or how the situation is different from our earlier example? So, in this case, in the earlier case, when each of the herdsmen they are trying to extract something out of the common, but here when we are discussing the pollution as an example of the tragedy of the commons, here we are thinking about something to put in where? Obviously in the commons itself. Let us take the case of example of your water. So, water is a commons because no one can forbid to exclude you from using this in any manner, but however it is rival because the quality of the water and the quantity of the water will be changed when one more individual will be added to do the same nuisance. So, in this case when you are talking about the sewage problem, chemical problems, when you are dumping into or running your sewage to the common water, or the chemicals you are doing, or radioactive or heat waste in the water, noxious and dangerous fumes into the air itself, then these are the cases which you are saying the tragedy of the commons in terms of pollution, either in air pollution or water pollutions. And if you just like the earlier example, if you want to see that what is the utilities out of it, that means when you are polluting, when you are actually letting your sewage go to this common river or water, and your neighbor is also doing the same activity, and his neighbor is also doing the same activity, and then this process goes on, then we are just trying to find out, or we are just trying to evaluate the share of benefits and costs in this decision, that let us put our own garbage in the open commons, maybe in the water or in the air. So, here again we are assuming that we are all of us are rational animal. That is why what we will be finding, that our share of waste we are discharging into the water or air, it is less than the cost of purifying them. So, what is that? So, if you are not dumping your wastes either in water or air, then obviously you do have to purify them. But here the rational animal thinks that my share of waste that I am discharging into the commons, it is less than the cost of purifying the same before releasing it. Then this is how I will be continuing the same decisions, that let's dump all my waste to these commons, and this logic is applicable for everyone. That is why we can say that we are locked into a system of following our ownness so long as we behave only as independent, rational and free enterprises. So, what is the assumption we are saying about us, about the human beings, that we are independent. That is why we take independent decisions, that let us put my garbage, my waste into these commons. Rational, why rational? Because if otherwise I have to purify my waste, then obviously it will not be cost effective. If I am going to leave it open without treatment into the commons, then it is cost effective to me. So, that is why this is how I am trying to maximize my utility, or I am behaving as if I am rational. And the third one is free enterprises. So, no one is bothering about it, everyone is free to take its own decision regarding anything. So, if these are the conditions and the context, then how to fix this problem? Because in these examples of air pollution and water pollutions, we cannot actually fence them. We cannot actually put a fence around the water or around the air to prevent this pollution problem. So, if it is not possible by this manner, then how to actually fix this problem of air pollution and water pollution he talked about, and then he talked about that this is a problem of commons itself. So, again he narrated about two mechanisms to fix these problems from the practical real world situation itself. The first one that we are also finding in economic literature in environmental policy, that is the coercive laws. What is coercive laws? So, in again pollution and environmental policy literature, we are finding these are the case of command and control mechanisms. That means, it is here the authority fixes or commands that these are the things you need to do. And what is the controlling mechanisms? If these are the targets, then how to actually achieve these targets? By putting certain command and control mechanisms by the government or by the regulatory authority itself. And to some extent, this problem has been tried to be fixed. And the second mechanism could be taxing, that if you are doing any nuisance or if you are actually letting your waste go and merge into the commons, then obviously you need to pay for it. So, in the economic literature, we are also finding this theory which is called as polluters pay. If you are polluting, then obviously you have to pay for it. And sometimes we are also in this literature, we are finding the cases of economic incentives. So, what is the economic incentive? That you need to see that if you have to find how to purify your waste, then if there is any technical mechanisms or technologies available to purify them, the price of this purifier can be lessened by the government itself by giving some subsidies. That is why you as a polluter will be thinking twice that let us take these advantages of this subsidy and get my wastage purified before letting it go to the commons itself. So, this is how we can say he also talked about this mechanisms, that how to fix the problem of pollution itself. And in this context of the population's problem, he then again shifted to narrate that which problems or which are the issues or the factors that are leading to this pollution problem. First of all, he talked about pollution problem, then he talked about this population problem. He tried to link both the terms. So, here he talked about this pollution problem is a function of obviously the population growth, and it is not only the population growth as a factor, but it also depends on the population density as well. That is what Malthus talked about, the explosion, geometric increase in the population. And the third one is this pollution problem is also a function of the property rights. Why it is the case of property rights? Because if you do have the property right on a piece of property, then obviously you want to see that the second person should not be suffering, and if the second person is suffering, he can claim that the first person is doing this problem because he is having this property right, and out of his activity in that particular piece of land, the externality or negative activity is coming out from it. Because there is no well defined property right, it is also leading to the pollution problems. Again, the popular examples that we are also finding in economic literature is the upstream river and downstream river. Suppose in upstream river there is a factory, and in the downstream river there is a fishery. So, what is happening in the upstream river? The factory is there, and the factory owner he is dumping all his garbage and all these poisonous water into this river water. Then obviously the population of the fishery in the downstream, it will be affected. But the owner of this fishery, he cannot actually claim anything from the the factory owner. Why? Because there is no well defined property right of river in that locality. So, that is why this pollution problem can also be a function of the property right as well. And another thing he talked about is how to legislate temperance. So, that means here he talked about that it is the morality which can actually govern about solving this problem, that pollution problem should be a function of morality. So, what is the morality of an act? So, it is a function of state of the system at the point of time when it is performed. So, it is actually talked about the state of the system. So, what is the situations that was existing at that point of time, and depending on that you will be saying that whether it is a moral act or it is not a case of moral act. So, philosophically you can say using these commons as a cesspool does not harm the general public under the frontier conditions, because there is no public. But however, if you are doing the same thing in a metropolitan city, then obviously this problem is not bearable. Again, why? Because it is the state of the system. In the first case, that it is a frontier, that means no one is going to be affected if you are dumping anything underground. But in the second case, it is the case of metropolis, and where whatever your action is there, if it is any negative, then it will be borne by the others. So, that is what you are saying, the state of the system is important in defining any activity moral or not moral. So, another example we talked about is the killing of a bison 100 years ago. So, 100 years ago killing an animal, there is no problem at all. But right now the situation and the system has been changed. Let us talk about the number of bisons. So, they are nearly endangered. So, in this context, can you say that if you are actually hunting a bison, so is it moral? Can you say it is a moral activity? So, that is what it depends upon the state of the system itself. So, he deduced that the morality is system sensitive, escaped the attention of most codifiers of ethics in the past. We need to talk about ethics and morality in the philosophical literature as well. So, in a nutshell you can say, if you have to legislate it, this kind of actions, that what to do or what not to do in different specific contexts or situations, then you will be finding that this prohibition is easy to legislate. If you have to prohibit no hunting, it is perhaps easier task than to enforce. Who is going to enforce it? Obviously, it is the administrators. So, that is why you can say that sometimes we face such situations that leads to think who will guard the guards themselves, right. So, that means if the administrator or the fellow persons in the hierarchy who are supposed to implement in the ground reality, if they are not actually listening to or they are not actually obeying to this legislation, then what will be happening? Who will be guarding the guards themselves? So, thus we can say that from this tragedy of the commons, he talked about that the challenge is to invent the corrective feedbacks that are needed to keep custodian honest. So, this is a very difficult task in fact. And another thing he talked about, that freedom is actually very intolerable, because he simultaneously talked about this population explosion and also the pollution case. And in the population explosion case, he talked about if everyone is free to breed, and in case of pollution also everyone is actually free to dump their garbage in the commons. So, if overbreeding brings its own punishment, in this case of population explosion, then perhaps the problem of population explosion could have been addressed. That means, population explosion is there if you are overbreeding, then obviously if you are suffering from starvation or disease, then there will be no public interest in controlling the same kind of breeding for your families. But what happened? In a welfare state like ours, this situation cannot be tolerated. You cannot actually put yourself to starvation and death. So, the state as a welfare mechanisms, it will come forward to rescue you and share whatever is left, share the benefits, share the goods and service, whatever is left. So, it does not happen in the case of welfare state and the tragedy of the commons, that is why happens. So, the concept of freedom to breed with the belief that everyone born has an equal right to the commons is to lock the world in a tragic course of actions. That is, you can say we do have specific legislations and the orders, we do have agreements as well, we do have UN's protocols as well. If you see the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, it describes the family as the natural and fundamental unit of society, and it follows that any decisions or choice with regard to the size of the family must irrevocably rest with the family itself. That means, whether to breed and how many to breed, it actually depends on your choice and your decision itself. So, no one is going to interfere in this matter. So, in this context, he talked about that we need to actually seek the conscience. Perhaps conscience is a factor which can be helpful in solving this problem of population explosion and pollution as well. But however, appealing to the conscience is a very difficult task, and this argument applies equally to many cases, like society appeals to an individual exploiting a commons to restrain himself from the general good by means of his conscience. So, that means here if you have to appeal to the conscience of each of these human beings, then we need to set up a selective system that works towards the elimination of conscience from the rates itself. And why again we are questioning about the appealing to the conscience? Because sometimes a bad conscience is a kind of illness, it can have pathogenic effects. So, when you are appealing to the conscience, it has two effects. One you can say the first one is long term disadvantages and the second one is short term disadvantages. So, if you are trying to explain it, that what is the bad conscience and then it is leading to long term disadvantages or short term disadvantages, we can take this example. If you ask a man who is exploiting a commons, that do not do in the name of your conscience, because commons are degraded, commons are polluted, commons are losing their characteristics and which is not good, then what are we saying to him? What does he hear? So, here we need to actually analyze the answer before taking any decision, that he has received two communications in this context for taking his decisions, that yes, I need to be away from degrading this commons or I can go ahead. And these two communications are contradictory. The first communication, which is known as the intended communication, that if you do not do as we ask, we will openly condemn you for not acting like responsible citizens. Then obviously, if we are asking, requesting and you are not actually obeying the rules, then obviously you will be condemned, you will be sometimes punished, right. So, this is the intended communications, the policy intends to bring this, but in this policy also, in this question also, in this request also, there is some unintended communications. What is the unintended communications in this case, in this example? That if you do behave as we ask, you will secretly condemn you for a simpleton who can be shamed into standing aside while the rest of us exploit the commons. So, what the society will be saying? That you just obeyed and others are rushing through, others are getting the benefits by not obeying the case, but you obeyed, that is why you are not getting any benefit out of it. So, in this case the rational human being, now he will be thinking that whether I need to access the commons or not, that is what the point is. Then in this case what is the solution? Is it a case of mutual coercion? Forceful, something should be there like your compulsory taxation, but sometimes we also do not like this compulsory taxations. Sometimes we obey the taxation system grumblingly, we support it, but with hesitations, but we do not have anything to do, that is why we have to pay the tax. And alternative to the commons need to be perfectly just to be preferable. And the second thing is that in this context, that if you do not even have any interest in paying the tax, you do not have any alternative as well. If there is no alternative to this commons, then obviously we do not have any preferable choice, that is why you have to obey the taxation systems. And here he talked about that in this context we must admit that our legal system of private property plus inheritance is unjustified. Sometimes we may think that this private property system is unjustified, as well as this inheritance is also unjustified in this private property right. But again, what is the alternative? If there is no preferable alternative, then obviously whatever the system is there, it must be followed. So, in this context he again added, we put up with because we are not convinced at the moment that anyone has invented a better system. So, in this context you can say, as alternative of the commons is horrifying to complaint, therefore injustice is preferable to total ruin. Maybe you are saying that this inheritance system is a kind of unjust, but sometimes, and as there is no alternative to it, then this injustice is preferable, it is better than a kind of total ruin. So, that is what you can say, whatever the existing alternative is available, out of it we just try to find what is the best. And in his concluding remark, that is why he talked about the importance of necessity. If you are feeling that this is urgently necessary, that means you are educated enough. Educated enough means you know that this is urgent, this is important for my survival or for something which is very beneficial. So, educating all the people about the tragedy of the commons, its consequences, the alternatives to it is very necessary for addressing this kind of tragedy of the common problems. And moreover, along with this educating awareness, creating different kinds of restraints, legislations, incentives for low reproduction here or any kind of common tragedy of the common problem, they can be or they must be instituted, otherwise this problem will be going and going. So, in the concluding remark he talked about freedom is the recognition of necessity, and it is the role of the education to reveal to all the necessity of abandoning the freedom to breed. Only so can we put an end to this aspect of the tragedy of the commons. So, in this case we explained, narrated the very case of tragedy of the commons as put forth by Garrett Hardin in his work towards the collective choice, how to govern the commons. He talked about the situations and how to govern, that it may be some kind of coercions, command and control, economic incentives, or creating awareness and educating the people. Then we can say that this is what. But what is the evolution or what is the additions to it? Is there any other procedures, methods or other kind of innovative ideas that are being in process or that were developed after this point of time? So, in furthering these evolutions and developments in this in managing these commons, in the next lecture we will be also talking about the second theory, that is the collective choice and the governance. And for this lecture we have taken the references from Musgrave and Musgrave, Public Finance in Theory and Practice, in their 1973 article. And the second one, the second core article that you need to follow, that is the Tragedy of the Commons, which he had written in 1968. Thank you.